Hello, and welcome to the 1D4 podcast, where we roll a die and ramble on for way too long about whatever topic it lands on. My name is Andrew, and joining me as always, Arjo,
Hello.
Nick,
Howdy.
and Robbie.
Heyo.
And today we will be discussing Lord of the Rings, kind of a throwback topic. It's something that there's not really been much news on since The Hobbit a few years ago. But that's going to change soon. There is, as I understand it, a TV show coming out, and we're going to talk about that. So I think a good starting point is all of our experience with Lord of the Rings. And I think I will start as the probably least familiar with things. I've watched the movies, and I've read The Hobbit, and I think the first Lord of the Rings book. That's it. I've not gone into any of the extended universe, played any of the games, any of that. I
have also watched all the movies, read The Hobbit, because I think we all did. Wasn't that all part of middle school?
Yeah, it was in our
something like that.
And then I read like the first 60 pages of Fellowship, and then I put it down when I got to Tom Bombadil. I couldn't. Fred Bolger was already like too much. Like that whole it was so not just Bombadil, but like the writing was so like dry and slow, and it was not engaging to read. And I had already watched the movies, so I had this vision in my head of like what Lord of the Rings was. And the books were just much slower and way more dead than I wanted or liked. I have also played a lot of the different games, which we could talk about a little bit. But other than that, yeah, I have also spent many hours now on the Lord of the Rings wiki, just reading through a bunch of the earlier age shit. So I am now versed on a little bit of that. Nick?
I am the biggest fan of Lord of the Rings here, so I find Arjo's statements very offensive. Since Tom Bombadilio is the best character in Lord of the Rings. I have read the Silmarillion, as well as the 3 main trilogy books several times. I read the Silmarillion a long time ago, so I'm still not as fresh on it as Arjo would be, since he just read the wiki basically all day. I've played a bunch of the games, a lot of mods for games that turned it into Lord of the Rings, the tabletop, a lot of things.
Did you guys ever play Lord of the Rings Risk?
Yeah, I have it.
I had that shit too. I love that. It showed up in Big Bang Theory, and I was like, oh yeah, that was the thing. And then now I miss it. I always played as the yellow elves, and made my brother play as the green elves, which were just strictly inferior because they were green, and neither of us liked green.
Even though green is a major association color with elves.
Green sucks.
Okay, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised when I hear people like Arjo have opinions about the books compared to the movies, because the movies were definitely visually stunning and like action packed. But I would just like to say the reason that they're visually stunning is because they stuck to the books, and the books are very
That's fair.
Like well written in terms of descriptions.
I will say there are some like the descriptive bits. Like I read an excerpt of him describing the Witch King as he landed on the fields of Pelennor.
Yeah.
Like the prose in it, it is very beautiful.
Yeah.
Like snippets of descriptions. It did not flow as a narrative to me. I thought like he was a very good history book writer, fantasy history book writer. I did not find the narrative.
That's fair. I really like
fluid.
Dropping myself into the story, and like having good descriptions is a big part of that. So
That's
what about you, Robbie?
And as far as my, I think I'm somewhere in the middle here of the group. So I have watched all the movies, even The Hobbit at once, and I have read all of the mainline books. So Hobbit, all through Lord of the Rings, and I made it halfway into the Silmarillion. And I'm sorry, Nick.
And then you realized you didn't hate yourself that much.
Yeah, RJ, you want to talk about dry? Let's talk about the Silmarillion here. It is. Fair. I mean, the Silmarillion is not a book so much as a historical text for a fantasy universe, and I know for a lot of people that's great.
It's an incomplete text as well as that.
It is.
And he was very good at making it like as a like a writing study. He did a very good job of making it seem like what it was. But
the way
it's
I
painful to read. Yeah.
the way I've described this before is that it is very much like the Bible, and that is a story of X begat Y begat Z, so on and so forth, somewhere down the line. The issue with the Silmarillion is, for a good 50% of the book, it's all elves and things like that. So even 10 generations down the line, those first people are still wandering around. So you cannot keep track of the names at all.
And it's like X beget Y, also known as Y1, also known as Y2. Like everybody has like 5 different names, and like he just used them interchangeably.
And all the names sound strangely similar to each other.
Yeah,
This is true.
Why did they have so many names? Did he just like making names?
So
Every time someone does something important, you get a new name for it. Like you tie your shoe, you become Robbie, the shoe tire. And so on.
But no, but that's like a title. Like he just straight like he would be like, "You were Robbie, now you're James," and it's just like,
Also
all he
known
did
as
was
Robbie
tie
the
his
shoe
shoe.
tire.
What do you mean? Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah. But it's good that, I think people not having a lot of experience with the Silmarillion or things that happen in Silmarillion will kind of work to the Amazon show's benefit.
Yes.
Because the plot line, the structure was laid out, the skeleton was laid out, but the meat of it can still be filled in. And they're probably going to pick and choose what they want, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be, having 500 elves and 3 important men in the same era. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to see.
As I understand it, the Silmarillion being a history of the world, it happens over a long, long, long period of time.
Basically everything that's
For
about Lord of the Rings.
context, there was like some untold millions of years of like creationism, right?
Mm.
And then at some point, people land on Middle Earth and start the first age of Middle Earth, which lasts about 500 years. Then there's the second age, which lasts 3,500, and then the third age, which is also 3,500. And
Okay.
all we really know about the Amazon show right now is that it takes place in the second age. So that is a huge chunk of time that they're and like a lot of event, or I wouldn't even say a lot of like it is a story. It could feasibly like the same things could happen over like a 50 to 100 year period. Like the only thing that like distinguishes that like time actually passing was the fact that there were a lot of men dying from old age. Because like all the elves were still around anyway, so it was almost just like one like short time span of story. So yeah, I'm curious how they're gonna solve that. I imagine they're just gonna condense timelines.
Most likely, yeah. Because I highly doubt they want to go through the trouble of like showing, like covering the early age, which is pretty important to build foundation blocks, and then
I hope we get some flashbacks though, dude.
That's what I don't know. Yeah, I wonder if they're gonna try telling it through flashbacks and stuff, or if they're just gonna, like you said, condense, like put the whole front half and just stick it as a little bit onto the second half. Which I feel like it's gonna be that part. It's just
that could be interesting, or like a character telling a story in character. Something like that.
What if it's all?
I'm not sure.
What if it's
I know
like,
that's literally telling, not showing, but
I mean, you can do like some dramatic sequence, like a character starts telling and then it goes through. Like maybe they could do something creative, like it's a different visual medium, like they do like this clever animation that
reminds me, like one of the Harry Potter movies did that for the tale of the three brothers, the Deathly Hallows. It was exactly animation completely different from the rest of the film. I really loved that, so I could see that being a way.
Gives it a sort of mystical, unearthly feel to it.
So what you're asking for is the Hobbit original animated movie, right? That style?
Yeah, totally. Yep. No, I want to go even further. Let's go for the original pitch of the original Hobbit movie, starring the four. No, wait, sorry. This was the Lord of the Rings original pitch idea, which was going to be starring the 4 Beatles as the 4 main hobbits, and they also get to sing all of their songs along the way.
Hell yeah!
That was the original pitch for the Hobbit movie.
Keep in mind, like,
I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings movie.
Like Peter Jackson did in the movies. Do a flashback to a previous age, like when Elrond was like, "I was there 3,000 years ago when the strength of men failed," and then like they just gave us a full flashback to the war the war.
It had a little vignette around the end too, didn't it? Like a little, like an old timey vignette, right? If I recall, like a little wispy white.
I think it was just dark because they were in Mordor. But
That's fair.
you may be right.
I remember.
Yeah.
But they could just do flashback. I want to see Feanor versus Gothmog, dude. The Lord of the Balrogs, bro.
So the movies we've kind of touched on a little bit already. They've obviously defined a lot of fantasy and a lot of cinema in the years since they've come out.
I bet stuff like Game of Thrones probably would not have happened
Yeah.
if the Lord of the Rings movies.
There's nowhere near. I don't think there's any other movie series I can think of that had quite. Well, I guess if you
Star
count
Wars.
all of the what's it called? All of the MCU, something like that. I'm talking like cultural impact.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I would say
Wars
Star Wars.
too.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Star Wars paved the way for Lord. Like Star Wars showed that like these high fantasy kind of story, the epic stories can sell. Before Star Wars, there was none of that shit. It was like I Love Lucy, right?
And of course, that's not to say that
Citizen Kane, like that was the kind of.
I do also remember talking with a lot of coworkers or friends that were older when War of the Ring came out itself, like when they were in high school or in college when it came out, and the idea of having a movie that long was impossible to them. And I remember them saying like there was an intermission for them because it was so long, even though like nowadays, because it was originally released
fit through all 3 hours of Endgame without
exactly. Yeah, now it's like
moving a single muscle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and more ways than just media influence movies.
And a lot of it was unique in that a lot of it was filmed at the same time, if I recall correctly.
All three movies at the same time.
Yeah, they filmed the whole of them, and then they came out in just over 3 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like no other. I honestly wish more series would do that kind of thing. Like it seems more cohesive and like everyone stays the same. They're all in the same mindset throughout the whole time. I think that probably contributes a lot to actors performing well and that kind of thing. Robbie?
I think the main issue that comes up with that, and it's not really an issue so much as it's something that can only really happen once in a blue moon because studios aren't going to be able to invest that much resources into making 3 movies simultaneously before one shows or actually returns any profit. Unless they can guarantee it's gonna have.
Jackson was given a crap ton of money to make those movies, and he honestly for how much they grossed, they were made pretty cheap. Like he used so much practical effects, so many practical effects instead of CGI that really cut down costs. And also I don't know if you ever think of super awesome special effects and think Lord of the Rings, but it did have great effects and everything felt so real.
And sword fighting.
Yeah, there's some stuff I rewatched it on in high def, and the Balrog does look a little bit dated.
Mm-hmm.
But it was excellent for the time, and it still holds up now. They did a great job putting everything together.
And I think an advantage.
No, someone came into his room.
And I think the advantage of the Balrog in the case of CGI is that the Balrog is supposed to be wreathed in fire and smoke and darkness, and so that actually lends itself more to not having full detail available to you. So it doesn't tend to go. So you don't need.
That being said, I still cannot wait for the full, Amazon funded CGI Balrogs and whatever else or whatever they decide to show us. They will still look spectacular. Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be like a Game of Thrones thing where they spend too much money on the special effects and we get a shit story. But
Game of Thrones did not fail, or the investing in special effects did not detract from everything else. It was just the directors were incompetent, and that was what killed the story.
I just strictly remember before the last season came out, they were like, yeah, we spent a lot of money on this. It's going to look great. And then I was just like, yeah, it did look good.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a good story.
Absolutely.
But I think we're getting it off here.
And I'm still looking forward to Amazon's rendition of this. I don't think it's going to be like that. So,
what did you think? I view Lord of the Rings as one of those. I guess epic kind of fits it, but like it is very much a light versus dark story, kind of like Star Wars. The original trilogy was very much like Palpatine and Darth Vader dressed in black, and they're labeled as the evil emperor, and like they are the bad guy. Like in the same way, Sauron is the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
You know, and more, like the orcs are very clearly bad guys. There's a very clear good versus
it's a very
evil.
classical story.
Yeah.
Just
There's
that
not
kind of
too
thing.
much overlap. Like there are only 3 like non-Mordor antagonists really, and that's like Saruman, Gollum, and Denethor.
False.
We're like
There's also the vagabonds that take over the Shire.
But
That's like a
books.
minor
Oh,
thing.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. I was talking about the movies, but you're right.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah.
But like other than that, it is a very clear cut. Like humans, men, elves, hobbits, they're all good guys. Orcs and Sauron, bad guys, kind of thing. Well, how did you feel about that? And like, what are you expecting for the show?
I think that's completely fine. I mean, like you can get complicated, but it's fine just to have it simple. Makes it easy, makes it visually easy to distinguish as well.
Mm-hmm.
For the show, I'm guessing it's going to be very similar. Like the main main antagonist is probably going to be forces of evil once again. Whether they're going to be wearing black and doing evil things. So
I would actually be surprised if it starts like that. Because a lot of the early Second Age was Sauron kind of like worming his way around.
Right. I'm curious to see how much they'll play on the Numenorians, like the men of the time, and their quote unquote portrayal of Iluvatar towards the gods, and how much they're going to actually paint that as like evil, or if they're going to paint it as like a humans being denied their curiosity type of thing.
I don't think even Tolkien painted it as evil. Like that, the whole lesson behind that was arrogance.
Right, exactly. With arrogance, but they also ruined it for other men. And like sometimes if I recall correctly, like they have like, yeah, those dang Numenorians ruined it for us Arnorians and other men of the time. So, but I doubt it's going to be like that. I don't think we're going to see as deep of a insight towards the politics of the time.
And if we're just talking generally how Tolkien deals with good versus evil, I think it's because it's in the nature of creating his own mythology. Like Tolkien really went back to the basics as far as like what classical mythology went to. Like he studied up a bunch on Norse. You can see a bit inspiration of Greek stuff up in there. And I think those classical mythologies very much had a line of this is good, this is evil, and that is not the way the world works.
He was also a war vet, right? That probably changed a lot. Like there are so many parallels with like he served in World War I and lived through World War II, so he saw that happen. And there's so many like the alliance of men and elves bringing down Mordor. Like that's the Allied powers bringing down Germany in World War II. Like there are so many parallels to his real world experiences and like the things he saw. And I think it would probably if he views it as like good versus evil, that probably helped him like view like I was the good guy, kind of like unequivocally, and like the Nazis were evil. I mean, the Nazis were evil, but like
we're not defending Nazis here.
Yeah. But,
not again.
Like, being able to draw that distinction was probably something that he wanted to do anyway, just personally, you know.
So the kind of we touched on the movies and like the effects and that kind of thing, and how big of an impact they had. We all watched them growing up. We all watched them. At least I've watched them many times. Probably the first one I've watched by far the most, and then the second one, and then the third one. Because I never want to watch the second one without watching the first one. I never want to watch the third one without watching the first and the second. So I end up watching the first one a lot.
Because you always have to start with the first. And then you don't. Sometimes you don't finish.
That's very interesting, actually, because the third one is, very arguably the best one.
By far. I really like the third one. And I like all of them.
Really? My favorite was the Two Towers.
Really? Yeah. That's surprising. That is usually people's least favorite. Same with the books as well.
Is that? What do you?
It's a transition. It's a transition from the beginning of the creation of the Fellowship, and then it's now the breaking of the Fellowship into transition into the end game. And the only really big spike in action, which a lot of people like in the movies, is Helm's Deep, which by far is arguably
Were there that many like Return of the King just had like the Battle of Gondor and then like the Battle at the Black Gate, which was like kind of tiny
right
compared to it was
you
still
get the Battle of Minas Tirith though.
Right,
That's
like that was
the
the
coolest thing
spike
in my
action.
opinion. Yeah, that is the coolest climactic battle I've ever seen in a franchise.
True. Yeah, it was great.
The Battle of Pelennor Fields is epic. I don't know.
It didn't have Legolas sliding down a staircase on his shield.
It
Oh,
did
but he
not
did solo
have
an
that.
elephant.
Yeah, he soloed the Oliphant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And most critics seem to agree with you guys because Return of the King still holds the title tied along with Titanic and Ben-Hur for most Oscars.
Mhm.
Just the three of those each have, I believe, 30 Oscars? Or some ridiculous amount like that.
I thought it got 24 originally.
Something
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but all of them are tied for just highest amount of Oscars for a single film.
Yeah.
I guess I will say, like, the thing I liked about the Two Towers, like, you're right, it was a transition, and like the two groups of the Fellowship that splintered up, like they both seemed kind of lost, but like it was done well and felt
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like those are the kinds of things that are really hard to execute.
True. It's just not as visually exciting, or build up like the Fellowship had.
But Two Towers had Gandalf and the Balrog falling into the lake under the mountain, and that was the single coolest scene.
We get it. You have a hard on for Balrogs. It's okay, Arjo.
No, when they were falling. All right, all right. Gandalf versus the Balrog was fucking cool.
True.
Okay,
this is absolutely true. If not one of the more confusing points of the movie, I will say.
Also,
but also just because it's. Go ahead.
The first time I watched it, I thought that he fell down and then somehow from falling ended up on top of a mountain that was also down there.
Oh,
so that confused me the first couple.
It's very not clear.
It was obviously a montage, Robbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just montage through a Balrog thing.
Because what's interesting is that when he's falling, he falls through places lived by creatures never seeing the light of day, even since the First Age, or something like that. And it's like really weird that it's like really like an important thing that just doesn't get mentioned. But yeah, it's weird.
What were they doing under Moria? How did the dwarves not find them? They just didn't have a rope that was long enough to go climb down there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah, Return of the King also had the Witch King, who was equally as cool as the Balrog.
Yeah, which is also during.
I could see Return of the King being a favorite.
The Battle of Pelennor Fields is the coolest thing ever. Plus, you also a big thing for me in the movies. My favorite thing, also during the tabletop, was the Easterlings. I was a big fan of like this weird force from the east that looks super cool. Has Mumakil / Oliphants like coming in and serving as this like dark force. I don't know why that always really stuck to me as a kid, but you get to see them the most in Return of the King, so a big favorite there.
I think a lot of my mom's favorite moment in the movies was the moment the elves march into Helm's Deep to help.
That's pretty dope.
Like she loved that scene so much, and I think that's kind of coloring my memories of.
That's fair.
It's kind of like we each kind of like picked a favorite character, kind of like my dad's character was Aragorn, right?
Yeah.
And my mom's was Arwen. Mine was Legolas. My little brother's was Gimli, and like we dressed up as them for Halloween at one point, and like it kind of. So now, even to this day, like after going back and rewatching them as I'm a little bit older, I appreciate Aragorn's story a lot more. But like in my head, Legolas is still my favorite.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
What about you, Andrew and Robbie? What was y'all's favorite movie / bit?
Definitely Return of the King for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I actually do. This is gonna be a bit weird, but I like Two Towers a bit more than Fellowship of the Ring, because I like seeing the plots progress a bit more, and I like seeing the group slip and. Also, Helm's Deep is just really cool. Also, and this is probably based off of my experience. It's from my family, with the movies. My mom was hugely into the Lord of the Rings and books growing up. Actually, fun fact on there: she hates Two Towers because she is the movie. She hates the Two Towers movie. She is convinced that they did the Ents wrong. She says that they make them look super dopey instead of being these wizened beings that she read from the book.
I can agree with
So
that.
she has actually refused to watch Return of the King. So I'm hoping maybe I'll convince her one of these days.
Wait, she refused to watch Return of the King?
Yeah, because she was so
Really?
angry with Two Towers.
Interesting. I can agree with that. Though. The ints, like, there's some of the ints that just like they're kind of comedic effect, while also being scary and
Yeah, because that
long
was
time to say anything.
Yeah, like a little Deus Ex Machina when it comes to overthrowing Isengard. That's fine.
Yeah, I like seeing Saruman getting
Ghost Army
wrecked.
was the
I
best.
like that whole sequence with them marching there. I
That also
honestly
had
like
one of the most
Rohan,
equatable themes.
which is maybe mostly because of the music, but
Yeah,
I really like all the scenes in Rohan, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those are the main, and like the journey out of the Shire, like just the beginning of the Fellowship. It's just so iconic.
Also
that
good
kind
music.
of thing. There are a lot of good scenes. Nothing that I can really
Rohan,
pinpoint as
home of
my
the
favorite.
Horse Lords, also sounds epic. Like,
Yeah, true.
I'll also say one thing I did not like about Return of the King is Denethor. Just every scene with Denethor in it, I hate him. Denethor sucks. He's abusive as fuck to Faramir, and I felt so bad for
What,
Faramir.
you didn't like the tomatoes?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I don't know. Well, what's the?
Yeah, he was great. I hated him.
Yeah,
I liked
the actor-
hating him.
What's
He was
that
very
name?
hateable.
John Noble.
God.
What's the actor's name? Is it John
Maybe.
Noble?
I don't
No,
know.
no clue.
I don't
I
know.
forget his name, but he plays
I
it
know
amazingly.
Carl Urban.
Yeah.
I will say that I think Denethor is one of those characters who might have actually been done a bit dirty by the movies, because the books imply, like, Denethor is more of a tragic figure in the books, at least from what I can recall. Like, Denethor isn't made out in the books to be nearly as incompetent as he is in the movies. Like, the books go out of their way to say that Denethor is the one who has managed to hold together Gondor up until this point. It's just the influence of Sauron and all that stuff that's over time driven him to this. At no point does he really feel like just this sort of toadying guy hiding around in the corner, or completely insane as he was in the movies.
I mean, but the stuff about Faramir and his brother and Boromir was definitely true, though.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, he's a terrible dad. Terrible dad. No question there.
I don't know. I loved Denethor. I thought he was a really good antagonist.
I'm pretty sure that scene with the tomatoes led to a lot of the reason I hated tomatoes up until like a year ago.
That's fair.
Like, I'm like thinking about it right now. I'm like, I have not liked tomatoes for the longest time. And I'm like, why? What is it about tomatoes?
You're scribbling down.
It's just something in my memory recessed. I'm like, nah.
So that's an amazing impact this movie has had on us, I guess. And bringing tomatoes.
Yep. But yeah. So, anything else we want to touch on the movies? Stuff about
what
else?
What did you guys think of Frodo as like the main hero? I guess there were two main characters of the story. There was Frodo and Aragorn. Kind of both as like main protagonists. What did you think of them?
I will say that the main hero is not Frodo. It is actually Samwise Gamgee. He's the unsung hero. That's the whole point of him.
Sure. But I mean, he's the unsung hero.
I know. I'm getting to that. The whole point of Frodo is to be like the one that everyone's looking to, but fails. And so I like that about his character, that he does fail and he relies on friends to make it across the finish line. That's why Samwise has always been like more of my favorite character than Frodo, because he actually gets the shit done.
Same.
Yeah.
Although do we know? I believe it is expressed through the story that like Sam would not have been able to throw it into the fire either if he'd had it at the time. That was how I understood. Like when Frodo, as annoying as it was, when Frodo was like, "You're not strong enough. I have to carry it." Like I after Sam had held it for a while to rescue him from the orcs or whatever. As I understand it, that was true.
Right. So
like Tolkien intended that like Sam would have been corrupted.
Correct. Yeah. If Sam had held on to as long as Frodo did, he would have been corrupted. Yeah. That was a big thing.
And it was like neither of them. It ended up being Gollum that destroyed it, right? And it was.
And I think part of the implication is that no one is completely and utterly pure. Like If
Exactly.
they like, the ring gets stronger the closer that they get to Mordor, and I think as it gets closer to Mount Doom, it reaches sort of like an point, like an asymptote, where if you get close enough, it doesn't matter who it is. If they get all the way to Mount Doom, no matter how pure they are, they can't willingly do it in. Which is why the dramatic irony of the fact that Gollum ends up accidentally causing it to fall in is what saves the day.
It also was really good for reinforcing the theme of mercy and pity, because like
Mhm.
Gollum was only there because Bilbo took pity on him and didn't
And
kill
yeah.
him in the Hobbit.
And the only reason
Man.
Bilbo took pity on him was because Gandalf told him to take pity on him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, yeah, sorry, Bilbo took pity on him in the mines when he saw how wretched he was.
Like
Gandalf,
how Sam took pity on Gollum after Frodo told him to.
yeah, that
Same
yeah.
kind of way while they were on their way. So
Mhm.
Gollum just pitied.
Themes.
Yeah, themes. There you go.
Breaking Andy Serkis, dude.
So
That
good.
dude's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was I forget the quote when they come out of Moria when Bilbo first picks up the ring in the books where Gandalf is literally just like, "Oh, you met Gollum. Yeah, he's a pity. You should feel of like all the creatures in Middle Earth, you must feel most sorrow for Gollum, for his is the tragicest of tales." It's like, yeah, damn.
Yeah.
And like when he was that, I will say the one thing that might push Fellowship as my favorite was that scene in Moria when he was talking about like it was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand, and then his whole like so do all who have seen such times, but that's not for them to decide. That whole
Yeah.
God, that was incredible. Was that taken straight out of the books? That seems like very Tolkien language.
I would not be surprised if it's so. Yeah.
It was
Mhm.
that whole scene was fantastic.
True.
Also, Ian McClellan's a god.
True. There's a
True.
reason he's my Discord profile.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All these years later, still
Still
Sir
there.
Ian.
Yep.
All right. So I think we've got a good foundation at this point. We can kind of dive into the meat of the discussion,
Do
the
we wanna mention The
potatoes
Hobbit?
of the discussion.
We don't
Or
know.
oh yeah, I guess the
Do we
Hobbit.
want to talk about the Hobbit movies?
No, it's okay.
Really? I enjoyed them. They were
Yeah,
fun.
they're enjoyable,
I liked.
but I don't think there was anything that they really added,
Sure.
like Lord of the Rings added to Lord of the
Everything.
Rings,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
just telling that story. I don't think the Hobbit one really. I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't think the story of the Hobbit was ever like as big and
Correct.
Well, yeah.
universal in scope anyway. But I still thought it was fun. There's so many people complain about like it was bloated and they stretched it across 3 movies, but like they added stuff in. Like it's not like nothing was happening.
So
across
that was a
like, they
big
did put
problem.
Stuff in.
The same people that are complaining about it being bloated are the people who are also complaining about the added stuff not being necessary and taking away from what it was that made the Hobbit. And I'm one of those people.
I could
so.
see that, but like
The
Hobbit was not super interesting to me in the first place. So
Correct.
that-
The Hobbit
that
felt
was
like
fun.
them trying to recreate the Lord of the Rings, like the essence of Lord of the Rings, like the magic behind it for a new generation. And
and it didn't
In
work.
that it definitely did fail.
Yeah.
I don't think it hit
agreed.
that
And
at
I
all.
think because Lord of the Rings and like Peter Jackson and the whole cast went after the essence of Lord of the Rings to make Lord of the Rings, whereas the Hobbit went after Lord of the Rings to make the Hobbit, and they should just gone after the Hobbit to make the Hobbit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see that.
So
I still enjoyed it. We got the Misty
Oh
Mountains.
yeah,
that was
it
super
was still
dope.
enjoyable, but
Yeah,
it
but it's
just
not Lord of the Rings.
yeah. Unfortunately, it,
Getting
like
to see Elrond, Gandalf, Galadriel, Saruman fighting off like the shade of Sauron. That was cool.
Mhm.
I don't like it wasn't I don't know if that ever happens in the background of The Hobbit, like unwritten.
Kind of.
I thought it was cool seeing all these people that you are supposed to understand as the movers and shakers of the world actually doing something.
the only unfortunate thing being that one of those movers and shakers, Radagast the Brown, turns out to be like they depict him as like this squirrely old dude with bird shit in his beard. Whereas
that
like
was kind of
in the
unfortunate.
books, he's this ripped like mountain man that like
Yeah.
hangs out with
Was he
bears.
supposed to be like Bjorn? Like was he supposed
Yeah.
to be this? Okay.
Yeah, he's supposed to be kind of like Bjorn. Like
Yeah,
fucking
that
dope.
was I definitely did not like the way they did Radagast.
Well, I mean, once again, comedic effects ruining a character, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that about covers the Hobbit.
Yeah.
So
Quick and dirty.
The Amazon
So-
show. I don't have. We kind of discussed it a little beforehand, but y'all have gone in much more depth between yourselves, and honestly, a lot of it went over my head when you were talking, like throwing out all these names and all these events and stuff, and just like, oh yeah, of course that happened.
Yeah,
That's
of course.
prior knowledge.
Yeah,
and
the
that kind of
Illuvitar.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So-
can give a quick summation of like the way the world works. Just like to give you scope of what the Second Age stuff that the Amazon show is going to be about is.
And I think
So
I
it
need
is
a
about
refresher
the
too.
Second Age.
Yes,
Yes.
They have confirmed that, and basically only that.
And
Do-
Lord
do
of the
we-
Rings was the Third Age?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Near
Do you
the
want to
end
go?
of the Third Age.
Should we go over what like the details of the show that we know first,
Yeah,
and then go into the world?
Okay.
that sounds reasonable.
Like
Oh.
to give
Sure.
context. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What do we know so far, Robbie?
Okay, so I've been looking a bunch into the show, and you will be happy to know that there's really not all that much we know about it.
Yeah.
So we do know. Okay, so originally when the show was first announced, a lot of people, and based on what they said, thought it was going to be actually an Aragorn backstory, a series like Aragorn growing up. However, as more and more things came up, a lot of people were sort of started getting hints that that might not be the case. One of the original biggest things was they showed a bunch of maps of Middle Earth, and most notably, they had pictures of Numenor on it. Now, for anyone that knows a bit more into Lord of the Rings thing, Numenor is basically like Lord of the Rings Atlantis. It was there during the Second Age, and then it sank.
Yeah,
So the
well,
fact
I mean-
that's on the map.
Let's maybe not go too much into the
Yeah.
to lore. I just meant like
Yeah.
the
Oh.
details of what we know about the show.
So yeah, but based on that, we found out, and they came out and said, yeah, it's going to be in the Second Age, and more or less that's all we know about the plot. Now we do know a few of the actors that are going to be in there. We even have maybe some names. So one of the big ones is Robert Aramaio. They said he's going to be playing the main character, whatever thing that would be. You may know him. He played young Ned Stark in some of the flashbacks in Game of Thrones.
True. Oh, he's Nowy Tens.
Mhm.
Mr.
And-
Mr. Nowy Tens.
And then Joseph Mali. He's the
The
guy who
internet
played
will
that.
get that joke.
He's the guy who was playing Benjen Stark on Game of Thrones. He's apparently been cast supposedly as the villain of the series, but there's still a lot of controversy around that. Not a lot of people have really gone out and said. So as far as the plot, that's really all we know. For example, Sir Ian McKellen and was asked, is he going to be coming back to play Gandalf? And he responded, they haven't asked him to
Okay.
yet. So it's implied that Gandalf is probably not going to be in here. Hugo Weaving, the person who played Elrond, another one of the few characters who might have lived long enough to have been in this series, has said he's not returning either, although that's more of his own personal choice. He's more or less done with Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
He doesn't
And then
I
want
was
to
gonna
come
say, if Elrond's not in it, that would be weird as hell.
How many seasons do we know it's going to be as well?
Okay, so Amazon has purchased the rights for it for an astounding $250 million. That's just for the rights. That's nothing to do with the production. Just $250 million. And that has scored them 5 seasons. So they have 5 seasons worth of material. We don't know how long the episodes are going to be. And if you're just to put that price point on context, $250 million for just the rights. The actual series itself is going to cost a lot more. But the movie trilogy, if you're wondering how the price compares, over the entire trilogy, about $280 to $287 million for just the movie trilogy. Yes, just the entire movie.
Insane.
Yeah, this is coming up to be the most expensive TV project ever, and budgets look like it's going to be close to $1 billion.
For all 5 seasons?
Which is about 1/3 of the movie trilogy's overall price or money that they got back. They made $2.92 billion off the movies.
Wow. Okay.
Aside from that, we don't actually know all that much about the series, just that it does take place somewhere in the Second Age. And maybe you guys could give a bit more context to why that's a really big time period for them to...
Yeah, the reason I asked for that context is to give us an idea of, like, now that we can go into what the Second Age is and how much there's actually in it, but the fact that we have 5 seasons and a likely budget of close to $1 billion to work with. So Arjo, if you want to go into the...
So, to start, the world of Lord of the Rings was empty, except for one dude, Eru Iluvatar. He was the god that created everything, and he created other mini gods who then helped him create the universe. It's the only thing that's ever really discussed is Arda, like the planet that Middle Earth is on. But like, I guess there could be a multiverse or like other planets with other stories going on, right? But they create Arda, and then some of these Ainur is what we're calling them.
Yes, Ainur.
Decide to go down and basically be the gods on Arda. And these they became, because everybody's got to change what the fuck they're called in their names. These are now the Valar,
Okay.
and then which think of them as like gods, and then the Maiar are like angels that each associate with one of the gods.
We had a good discussion, I think, beforehand, where it was like LotR, you can think of them like Christianity god. And then all of the Valar, when they're on Arda, are basically Greek gods, where they have an aspect or domain each associated with them.
Which they are like there are 8 like super powerful important Valar that again have another name. They're the Aratar, and they were basically the Olympians. Like the king of them was Manwe. He was like the sky and the winds, right? Yep. And he's basically the equivalent of Zeus. And his brother Melkor is the big bad guy. He was also the most powerful of the Ainur. He was the most powerful being that Eru Ilúvatar ever created. Yep. And Melkor was the big bad in the world of Lord of the Rings before Sauron. He was so all these Ainur were helped Eru Ilúvatar create, the universe, but they didn't have any like individual powers of creation on their own. They were only able to make what Eru Ilúvatar let them make. And Melkor didn't like that, and he kind of as he was creating sought out the secret fire or the flame of creation, basically, the power that Eru Ilúvatar used to make everything, and he never found it, and it kind of drove him dark. And so come time they land on Arda and create Valinor. Whenever they talk about like the Undying Lands to the west and all that stuff, like the west is where the gods live, basically, and it's called Valinor for the Valar. And then there's Middle Earth. There was also the Dark Lands, which also have 3 different names.
Yeah, to the east, where like we don't really see much of like the Harad Desert and
go beyond Mordor, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay.
And most of the story of Lord of the Rings takes place on Middle Earth. I think like the region of like that northwestern portion is Beleriand or something like that. But you get men and elves were directly created by Eru Ilúvatar. He created a bunch of gods and then like skipped 8 tiers and made men and elves. And they kind of became
delegating.
Yeah. And you get the First Age, which the whole main conflict about the First Age was Melkor goes full on bad, decides he wants to try to take over / trample on Middle Earth. In the process, he pisses off the gods and elves. He steals these special jewels called the Silmarils that are very cool, but don't actually really matter for the story that happens in the Second Age. But they're really cool, and a lot of stuff with a lot of cool people happens, including Elf King versus Balrog 1v1s that are dope. But the First Age ends with all the gods and all the elves banding together to fight Melkor, and they banish him into oblivion because they can't kill him because he's dope. And then at some point, Ungoliath runs away, even though she was like.
Can you explain Ungoliath a bit?
Ungoliath was like no, she was a giant, like many-formed monster.
Yeah.
Shelob is a child of Ungoliath that is a spider.
You can think of Ungoliath as like a dark evil, like
think of
evil.
Think of Ungoliant as like Typhon. She's like the mother of all monsters, like just primordial force of darkness and chaos. And one of the 2 people that Melkor was ever actually scared of. And she helped him kill the two trees of Valinor, which are like it was like a Garden of Eden equivalent, and do all the shit. But the important part of that leading into the Second Age was Sauron was a servant of Melkor / Morgoth because he got another name because of course. And he after they banish Morgoth, Sauron kind of like weasels and deceives his way out of getting punished for all the shit he did, and convinces the elves and men of Middle Earth that he's good now and everything's going to be okay.
And that's
so
why
then
he's called Marion or something like that.
Yeah, he has like an actual like Maiar name. Sauron was like Gandalf and Saruman. He was a Maiar angel.
Okay.
And so that leaves us in the Second Age. We have Numenor, like Robbie talked about, was the first kingdom of men. It was like you know how Aragorn is very long lived. He lives like 300 years or whatever. He's got part elf blood from his line. Basically, it was a line of men descended from a Maiar and an elf, because you got to mix all the magic blood in there. And they were an island kingdom off the coast of Middle Earth.
Yes.
And there is a big war of the elves that happens between Sauron and Celebrimbor, and I think Elrond was around at that time. He was. I'm pretty sure he was Gil-galad's chief lieutenant.
Yeah.
But
because the elves that we have in the Third Age are that were from the Second Age were Galadriel, Sindar, Elrond and Sindar, the shipwright.
Okay. And Galadriel's husband, right? Celebrand? He was also around.
Celebrand.
He's not the shipwright though. But the shipwright is also out there.
Yeah.
He seems dope enough to have been around for a while.
He has a very cool title too.
Yeah.
But Sauron tricks Celebrimbor, who Celebrimbor is the grandson of Fëanor. Yeah, lots of names. Fëanor is the guy that made the Silmarils. He's like the elf. He's one of the Noldor, the like smithing elves, the craftsmen. And Fëanor was like the best among them. He smithed the Silmarils, and they were like these super magic jewels. And Celebrimbor, he was like, "Yay, I want to make magic shit too." And he makes the rings with Sauron's guidance. And Sauron apparently like taught him a hack to make the rings evil, but didn't tell Celebrimbor about it. So Celebrimbor made these 19 rings of power that all had a Wi-Fi hack in them, so that when Sauron went to Mount Doom and forged the one ring, he was able to hack all the rings, right? That is.
He said he wouldn't do it. He said he wouldn't do it.
He said he wouldn't.
He promised Celebrimbor he wouldn't do it. So.
And so when Celebrimbor finds out about the One Ring, he declares war on Sauron, and you get the War of the Elves. Celebrimbor personally got wrecked. He got like brutalized, like ran through on a pike, and then they paraded him around in front of the Elven Kingdom city. He gets dead, and a couple other elves lose epic 1v1s to Balrogs and shit. But Sauron is eventually defeated and taken captive and brought to Numenor, and he is held prisoner in Numenor, and that's where we get him. He starts whispering in the ears of kings, kind of very much a Wormtongue and Theoden situation. And he starts to poison
except from a distance.
Yeah, kind of. But he ends up getting released and named as a court advisor.
Yeah.
To one of the kings, like the biggest idiot of them all.
He was also. I thought he was also like disguising himself at that point too, or something like that.
Okay, I was imagining Sauron in like his full armor.
No, he was not. He was not like the Dark Lord at this point. Yeah. He still looks like an elf.
So funny.
Yeah, he looked like an elf. I think he might have had another name at that point when he was the advisor.
He was Marion. It means like the admirable or something like that.
No, Marion is a. Oh, I'm thinking Melian. Never mind. Oh my God, names.
Yeah, this will be like the TV show. We're giving you good insight to the TV show.
Yeah, how many of these names are they going to use?
This is the minimum amount of names that we need to get through this story.
Yeah, okay.
But so the big thing, he's brought to Numenor where he starts poisoning the king. The big thing about Numenor, like it is this kingdom of very powerful men that live in splendor. And the god said like you can have all this great stuff. The only condition is you can never come to Valador. You can never come to the land of the gods because we're segregationists, I guess. And Sauron poisoned the minds of the king and I presume the other nobles in court or whatever. But he ends up deciding, fuck that, we're gonna go claim the Valinor, the land of the gods, for ourselves because we're awesome Numenorians and we can do that.
This was also after an age of expansion into Middle Earth by them themselves too.
Yeah, that's where you get like Minas Ithil and Minas Tirith. These were initially like colonies of Numenor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
that's why they're so much better.
That's why they're
rest.
why they're also separate from Numenor and they're actually men on the actual continent.
And yes, Andrew, that's why like Rohan is looks so much lesser than Gondor because it's not leftovers from Numenor. But this idiot king,
and like those giant person statues that are doing this.
Yep,
are
those are like statues of Numenorian kings.
Okay, yeah, I like those.
But this dumb king, his name was like Al something. It was like Al.
No, it's just Al. It's just Al.
Yeah, Al. Okay, we'll call him Al. He decides to go take Valinor and claim it from men. And there's this one. I guess he was a noble. It doesn't. I don't think it ever said what he was in Numenor, but his name was Elendil, which you might recognize from the movie. What's his face? Hugo Weaving's character. Elrond calls Aragorn like the last of the line of Elendil. Elendil was, think of him as like the first king of Gondor. He was like, this shit's fucked. They're gonna get wrecked. I'm gonna leave and go to Middle Earth and try not to get blown up in Numenor.
I don't want to be associated with these people.
Exactly. And Elendil
sounds like a smart choice
at this point because everybody's very very old and lives a long time. Isildur is Elendil's son, and he's like alive right now. And he had a brother named Era something, Arathanian or something. But Elendil and Isildur and the other kid go to Middle Earth, and they basically start the Kingdom of Gondor. And they get out of there right on time because the gods, like as soon as Al steps foot on Valinor, the gods like smite all the men and then sink.
I don't think they even got there. I don't think they got there. I think they like got shipwrecked.
No, they did. Al stepped foot on Valinor, and then that's when divine retribution.
That was a trigger. Yeah.
And the gods sank Numenor. At some point, there's also an elf kingdom that gets sunk, but I think that was separate. That was a separate issue because we can just sink civilizations left and right.
That's a very effective defense mechanism.
It's very Atlantis style, where it's like it becomes a city underwater. It's like a folly of men. Like
it is a lesson of hubris. They walked too close to the sun, and the entire kingdom got wrecked. But you're left over with Elendil and Isildur, and then Sauron got out of there somehow and goes to Middle Earth and basically declares war on men. There's a sect of men called the Elendari, something like that. They're basically elf friend, right? They believe in the righteousness and purity of elves, and they believe in the light of Valar and all this stuff. And they're like, don't do this hubris shit because we're clearly not supposed to go. We're like they were the humble men basically, and Sauron declares them as enemies of him and starts blood sacrificing them to Morgoth because I guess he thought he could bring Morgoth back,
who was trapped at this point,
right? Yeah, and all this shit boils over, and then that's when you get the War of the Last Alliance, which is the one that we see Elrond and Isildur fighting. Gil-galad was also
the end
there,
of the Second Age.
Yes. When Sauron is destroyed, that is considered the end of the Second Age.
And Isildur takes the ring and does not destroy it.
Yeah. So the span of time that we're looking at this show possibly encompassing is death of or banishment of Morgoth to death of Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's
a
bunch of it's like there's a bunch. Obviously, there's a bunch of shit because I just talked for like 20 minutes about it. But like it's all like one continuous line that could definitely be like that story could take place over 100 years.
Yeah,
like
and it's something that you hear the names of the different Numenorian kings like as they come up like during all these ages. They're not important. They really are not that important. Like all you need is Al, whatever his actual name is. And I assume that's what they're gonna do. Is just like have Al be ruling, stretch the line of Numenorian's age, and like say
They're probably gonna do it like the guy before Al.
yeah,
Right. Start with him, and like things seem good, and then like Impetuous Son ends up
right.
taking power, and Sauron poisons him, and
Yeah,
blah, blah,
and that's why I thought like getting the context of 5. Like, we have 5 seasons. Like this is quite a bit of time that we do work with. But
do you think that's what they're probably going to focus on? That like whoever the main character is, do you think he's going to be a Numenorian? Yeah,
I would love to see Gil-galad as the main character personally, but I don't know if he's important enough in the fall of Numenor to be included.
Well, here's the thing.
I don't think he was present enough in Numenor for that to work. I would imagine it would be Elendil or maybe Isildur.
Right.
Actually, the character that Robert Aramaio is supposed to play has been named as Beldor. I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but they've said.
Oh, that's right. Nobody knows who the fuck that is. Like, they either made him up or gave him a different name.
Okay.
I mean, as we've established, that giving him a different name is completely on.
It's completely Tolkien. Yeah.
I assume what's going to happen is it might be a very Game of Thrones thing where there is a main character, Jon Snow, but there's all these different arcs that will take up half of a season of one of the shows where you just have someone else writing the shots.
The weird thing is, I don't know, like if there's 5 seasons, that means there's 5 like season finales. There's 5 checkpoints, and I don't know that the story as I laid it out really has that. There's like the forging of the rings, right?
Is there anything is there anything I was just going to talk about the forging. Like, is there anything climactic like after Sauron reveals his gotcha, other than him just getting captured? And
I mean, there is the war, the war of the elves.
Yeah, my bad. Fully forgot about the war of the elves.
That 20-minute speech, you forgot stuff from it.
The elves of Lothlorien and Rivendell and Doriath, because it was still around at that point, I'm pretty sure.
Was that the one that got sunk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lothlorien elves are the best, though, let's be honest. Just saying.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Galadriel's dope. But yeah, there's the War of the Elves. So I am at like first checkpoint would be like the haha, here's the one ring, like they end the season with Sauron like raising his fist and going haha, my ring.
Yeah,
right?
There you go. That exact scene from like the Fellowship of the Rings where they just show him going
except he's not in his armor.
Oh,
at that point,
okay,
right?
Good point.
Yeah.
I still, just for comedic effect, every time I imagine Sauron, he's fully in his armor.
Yeah, like when he's in capture, he's like,
yeah.
Yeah, then there would be like I guess the end of the War of the Elves could be checkpoint 2. And then the whole men going to Valinor could be 3.
Yeah.
And then I guess the War of the Last Alliance.
I feel like the War of the Last Alliance could be 3 seasons. I feel like they could stretch a lot of that because like all we really hear is just the War of the Last Alliance. Like it happens and then we know the end of it. I don't think we know a lot of like the battles or things that happen in between.
True. I feel like that's content that makes it fills out the war with like individual battles and make some character arcs within that kind of thing.
Speaking of like specific character, we can get to see the ring wraiths. We can get to see the Kings of Men and watch them fall.
That's the one thing I added to our outline.
So freaking cool.
Yeah. The one thing I added to the outline was like getting to know the ring wraiths' identities. Like even like because we know a little bit about the Dwarven Kings, but the human kings, since we see them as the ring wraiths, would be really dope to get like their actual identities. We get the identity of one of them from the tabletop War of the Ring, Comduel of the Easterlings, and he's like the main human king in the east of Harad Desert, and we know that he gets corrupted like all the other ones. But it'd be really cool to see the individual personalities and like what happens.
Would be.
Oh, so some other cool things that we could get to see happen. The White Tree of Gondor. Andrew, the tree in the courtyard. That was a sapling.
Up there. I see it up there on Arja's wall.
True.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
There it is.
Yep.
That was a sapling. There was originally a white tree in Numenor, and Isildur, when Elendil was GTFOing because he knew Numenor was fucked, Isildur went and stole like a little sapling and brought it to Gondor. And then that was actually the tree that we see in Gondor is technically the third, because at some point the one that Isildur
Third of
brought
its
got
name.
burned down, and then somebody went and got another one from a mountain somewhere. But yeah,
White
we
Tree, third of
we
its
could
name.
also see. I'm curious to see the Palantirs. There are apparently
Palantir.
7 seeing stones, and I kind of
Yeah.
want to know like where they came from and what happened with them, kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
I mean, they were also very significant in. So one of the things I think that's going to be important for the Second Age is tying to the movies, and the Palantirs were super important in the movies. So I'm
Mhm.
assuming we're going to be seeing like this tie-in. We're going to be seeing Isildur. We're going to be seeing hello cat, hi small Kleina. We're going to be seeing like these tie-ins to the movies that will connect them. I really feel like that's going to be a big push for them. So I'd be down to see Palantirs as well. I didn't think about that actually.
Yeah.
About getting to see the creation and stuff.
We can also see so at some point during the Second Age, Manwë, the Zeus equivalent guy,
Mhm.
the king god of Valar, noticed hello, noticed that Sauron was still around and kicking up shit, and he sent 5 Maiar, who we know as the 5 wizards, to go help Middle Earth.
Mhm.
He was like, he gave them another name, because why the fuck not? I don't remember. It starts with an A. But he was
Sorry.
like, you guys, yeah, that one. He was like, you guys go help keep the balance in Middle Earth. And so it would be kind of cool to see like Gandalf get his mission. You know,
Yeah.
like we saw the end of it. It would be kind of cool to see the beginning.
Yeah.
Gandalf Origins.
Oh God, yes.
I want to see Celebrimbor. So tie-in from the games. Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor are really fun games that take characters from Lord of the Rings and uncanonize it to make a serial story.
Yeah.
But Celebrimbor is the Wraith in Shadow of Mordor, and he was a dope character. He is very cool in that game. And as I understand it, his actual like backstory is very similar. Oh, your cat is typing extensively.
Oh, yeah. Okay, ignore that.
Q Elendil. I see.
I see.
You know, the cat is just as likely to come up with a Lord of the Rings name as anyone else here.
True. Very true.
But yeah, I'm curious to see that. I also we can see the King of the Dead and like the deal he made with Isildur.
Oh,
and him
true.
betraying
For the
him.
last fight.
Yeah. We can see like who he was beforehand.
Yeah. I do think that. Go ahead.
He was a king of men that never got a ring, which I find curious.
He came after the rings were given out, wasn't he?
Was he?
Oh, he
I mean, if so, like, or he's descended from a king that never
Right.
got a ring. Like whatever his tribe of people was, Sauron was never like, hey, you can have
Yeah, the
a
mountain
ring.
people that turned into the green CGI ghost army and
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep, those guys. There's another Kingdom of Men called the Kingdom of Arnor that's a little bit north of Gondor and north of Rohan, if I recall correctly. That fought Angrath, or the Lich King and
Angbad?
Angbad, Angbad.
The Witch King?
Yeah, the Witch King. And we never get to see those, but they die out. And I can't remember if one of their leaders is one of the Ring Wraiths or not. But I would love to see some of them too, because they were a big favorite in the tabletop for me as well.
As for me, one thing I kind of want to see, and this is a sort of weird thing because I actually played a Pathfinder campaign way back when, where it actually took place during this time period. We didn't know at the time, but it was revealed to us like, oh wait, we're in Middle Earth. But one thing that I really like from that, and one thing I want to see in this, is a bit more of Sauron as a person. Like, I want Sauron to be that conniving character we love to hate. I know it's weird to kind of humanize the guy, like Andrew said, the big black armor or guy. That's just where you're on. I want to see.
He was Littlefinger.
Yes,
he was Littlefinger way before he was the Night King. Like he was a snake.
And I want to see that.
Yeah, I think it would be very cool. Which, like, when you said Benjen Stark is going to be the main antagonist, like that kind of feels to me like that's saying he's going to be Sauron. And I never pictured him as a Sauron, but I mean, I guess I don't know what Sauron looks like other than like what I see in Shadow of War. But
it's
like
just more armor.
Yeah.
Take off his helmet. He's just wearing another helmet.
Oh, the Arkham Knight effect.
No, the real thing is he's supposed to be this really pretty boy looking elf guy, like the
Yeah.
most beautiful among the elves. Like, I know he's a Maiar, but that's the way he's like depicted and described as.
We can trust him. He's pretty, right?
No,
Exactly.
Luthien was the prettiest elf, Robbie. Come on.
Yeah,
Come on.
it's been like a taste.
Everybody knows this. Come on. It's Luthien, obviously.
I'm sorry, I lost track of that name somewhere, like
Yeah,
2/3 of
true.
the Silmaril. And-
But yeah, so
Yeah.
speaking of that and kind of like wrapping it together, I think, I mean, I keep comparing it to Game of Thrones. I know I do, and I'm sorry, but Game of Thrones had a lot of
Nothing to
names.
be sorry about.
Not as many names as Silmaril or the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings, I think, but it handled
Still
it
quite
well.
a few.
And the reason it handled it well was because of how good the acting and the portrayal of the characters were, I feel. And
it kept, there were a lot of people, but only a few were relevant at any one point in
Right.
the story.
Exactly. And I hope we get that too. I feel like Amazon and the budget that they have is going to be good enough to do that, to have that same effect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to the visuals. You know, Lord of the Rings has always stood out as one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched. Granted, it's filmed in New Zealand, which I think we got confirmation that this was also going to be in New Zealand.
Yep.
So like,
Yes.
you know, I'm going to look forward to that beautiful visuals again. So I have really high hopes for this. I think this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
If not just throwing money at a wall will make it good.
And like these things that we talked about that like could be issues and like, oh, I hope they don't fuck up like the Hobbit movie, like the
Mhm.
Hobbit did and stuff. Like this is stuff that like the writers and directors have to be aware of now.
Mhm.
Like and they wouldn't spend $1 billion to make
Right.
something
Yeah.
something like that. Like
And
I have
with-
to imagine they're dedicated to quality.
With them already like earmarking 5 seasons, that makes
Yeah.
me hopeful that they'll have like the whole story and
Yep.
like all
the
the
beginning,
highs and
middle, end
lows
plan.
planned out, that kind of thing. Like that's
Mhm.
all the best shows I've watched have been planned and
True.
they've ended at that point. As long as they don't plan for 5 seasons and then just start tacking on more seasons at the end.
I would hope
We
like
could
they get,
stretch this to an 8th season.
yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like you get to the end of the second age, which like leads into the movies. And if you want more seasons, you can't. So hopefully they can't, even if they do, they try to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they can add stuff more in between, but the
Yeah.
important part is they need to have an end goal. Like this is where we're going to. Like one of my favorite series is One Piece, just small tangent. But the reason I think the series works so well is from the very get-go, we have an end goal, and then if the author decides, oh, I want to do some stuff, he can add it in between, but it's always moving towards that. And I think that's a really big important thing with writing. You need to know where you're going. Otherwise you end up with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, I think that does a pretty decent job. Any other comments about what we could see, what we potentially might see, what you want to see?
I saw a couple of notes in here. I think Arjo wants Balrogs, was it? Was it Balrogs, Arjo, that you want?
I think
I know you
we've
guys.
got a
it's
few
basically
things
me
about
between us at
Balrogs.
this point, but for the audience, there are two moments in. I believe they both take place in the First Age, which means like unless they do flashbacks, it wouldn't show.
It is the first age, yes. This is like the Balrogs were like the
but-
generals of Morgoth.
Right.
That's dope.
But they're Fëanor was like the big elf guy that made the Silmarils. And then he ends up fighting he ends up fighting all of the Balrogs. He's like
14, right?
1v huh?
It's like 14 of them, right?
I think so.
think.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
But he's like marching with the host of elves to go after Morgoth to try to get the Silmarils back. And the Balrogs are like running away, and then they realize like they're close to their home base, and they're like, wait, and they turn around and they just like slaughter all the elves until Fëanor is the last one standing, and he like fights them off, and then Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, like
What a name.
smites him down into the ground. And he survives, but he like bleeds out to death, right?
Oh, rip.
But like there's a scene
Killed by
like
the
this.
Goth
There's
Mog.
one elf like 1v14ing these Balrogs. Just
Yeah.
seems epic. And then there's
We go down
also
to the king of the Balrogs.
right. And then
Yeah.
there's also a later scene in an I think this is still in the war against Morgoth, but I think it's one of Feanor's grandsons or grandnephews, somebody, is 1v1ing Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, in the middle of a battle, and he starts winning, and then another Balrog comes up from behind and like binds him with the whip, and then Gothmog like hammers him into the ground until nothing is left of him but dust.
Nice.
So
Gothmog really seems to like to smite people.
He
That's
does.
what I'm getting
Yeah,
here.
he
into
likes
the ground.
slamming. His if I recall correctly, he had a giant black battle axe. Read them flame.
Yeah.
Just
There you go.
like
If I
think
remember-
of how cool the Balrog was
Yeah.
in the movies, and just think of how epic it could be to see scenes like that with Amazon's budget. Like,
Ooh.
bro,
Yeah.
So Balrogs is what Arjo wants.
Yes.
And then more Balrogs.
Yeah.
what about? It sounds like Robbie wants to see Normie Sauron.
I want to see Littlefinger Sauron. That's all I
Yeah.
want to see. That is
That
my
would be
goal
cool.
here.
Yeah.
I
What about
Get
you,
some
Andrew?
more personification of the big bad from the
True.
trilogy.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? What do you want to see?
That's, I mean, pretty much. I want to see that.
He only
city
knows
get-
what we've told
Yeah,
him.
I've literally. This is all the info
Yeah.
I've got. I want to see that city get smitten after
Yeah.
after arrogant guy steps on the land of the gods,
Ow.
and then
Yeah.
they're just like, you know what? You're
No.
pretty stupid
Yeah.
for
What
doing
about
that.
you, Nick?
I want to see the cityscapes. Like seeing
Yeah.
Minas Tirith in the original trilogy was, it was so gorgeous. I can remember that every single in my head every
Yeah.
single time.
Dude,
It was just like it was. You have the vision in your head when you're reading the books, you know, and it hits it. It gets it
Yeah.
perfect from the movie. So I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to like seeing Numenor before it gets smitten.
Yeah, true.
Oh, we get to see Minas Ithil
Yeah,
before it
before it becomes
becomes
Minas
Minas
Morgul.
Morgul.
Yeah,
That was
Minas-
an
Minas
epic
Morgul-
moment in the game.
Yeah,
Like,
Minas Morgul is also such a good iconic scene, but we don't only get to see its bridge.
True.
But yeah, I would love to see Minas Ithil. So
Dude,
Robbie,
imagine
anything
getting to
else?
see.
No, I told you I want Littlefinger or Sauron. It's a small wish, but it's one I think they can pull off.
that's
Okay.
fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine, you know how in the movies, like Minas Tirith is kind of like run down, and there's like broken pieces here and there. Imagine like if we get to see it in its prime, and you can like side by side the shots, and like it matches up. I'm sure they would be faithful to the original.
Right.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be so cool. So
All right,
yeah, a
so
lot of potential.
general consensus, it's hopefully going to be good. I really hope.
Tentative 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, we're already giving it a rating.
I see.
Yeah.
100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Calling it now.
All right. Well, thank
Speaking
you.
of tomatoes.
Oh yeah.
Denethor.
Don't speak it. Don't say the names.
Thank you to anyone who's joining us. This has been the 1D4 podcast. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, want to throw any tomatoes, anything else, send us an email at 1d4podcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at 1d4 podcast. Among other things, it'll be listed on the end screen, and you'll get all the up-to-date info on the podcast and us, but mostly the podcast.
Yeah, nothing about us.
Yeah,
Certainly
pretty
nothing
much.
about me.
Thank you for joining us, and have a good day, night, time.